Hello, everyone. Welcome to Industry 4.0 Club. We are here on our Thursday LinkedIn Live session on process or people, process, and culture. And today we have Justin Sherman on here with us, who is working. He's in Washington State, and he's working on trying to engage people, millennials, and other young people at high schools and universities to get introduced into manufacturing and other business. So, looking forward to have a great conversation here with Justin here today. But before we start, just a quick introduction to what we're doing here, and myself and Justin as well. So again, thanks everyone for joining. Here we keep these here in the summer season every other week. So this week it's Tuesday and Thursday, and next week's gonna be Monday and Wednesday. We are here on Industry 4.0 Club talking on people, process, and culture. On Mondays, we do have women in manufacturing, and on Tuesdays, we have manufacturing, future, and technology. And then on Wednesdays, which will be next week as well, we will have our fireside chat. Again, if you like having these types of conversations as much as we do, please keep joining our rooms and LinkedIn Lives from Monday to Thursday every other week here, typically around noon, 11:30 Eastern. Sorry, 12:30 Eastern, 11:30 Central. And again, you can find our schedule on www.industry4.40club.com as well as here on LinkedIn. And when we have our Clubhouse events, you can find them on Clubhouse as well. So thanks everyone for joining, and let's get started. So first, just an introduction to myself. My name is Pingel. I'm one of the co-founders of Industry 4.0 Club and one of the co-hosts of our Thursday People, Process, and Culture events. When I'm not here on representing Industry 4.0 Club, normally my day job is I work for Ingersoll Rand. I'm a product leader for digital solutions, where we are working on making our equipment smart and connected. Justin, over to you. A little bit about yourself.
Yeah. I'll start off with thank you for having me. I'm Justin Sherman. I've been in industry for about 14 years now. I started as what I would say an informal apprentice machinist, and worked myself up rather quickly, getting through inspection and then into programming. Then after introducing quite a few process improvements, got myself into a management job, did that for a few years before getting into workforce development education, where I taught CAM programming and mathematics, and then introductory manufacturing skills for a pre-apprenticeship program called Manufacturing Academy that operates out of Washington State here. And then getting promoted into program management, managing that program, until going back into industry as a scientific instrument maker at Intellectual Ventures, and then later leading a prototyping team for contracting company Concordis that was operating within the Advanced Prototyping Center at Microsoft. And then did that for a couple of years before moving on to start working on launching Equity Machine Works, which is we're currently in the startup phase, but we're working on launching, and it's going to be essentially a social enterprise that operates as a advanced manufacturing center that incorporates a workforce development program that's community connected as well as connected to local apprenticeships, to help create more accessible opportunities into our industry. And in many ways, that's going to be kind of what we're talking about here today is accessible opportunities and how leveraging student-run businesses can help create those, as well as create sustainable programs that solve a lot of the problems that these tech centers and community colleges are facing.
Yeah, we really, when we have these rooms here on people and skills and training, etc., it's great to talk to people like you that are actually out there trying to engage in your local areas. Young people when they come out of school, either high school or university, and working with businesses, trying to set up some kind of relationship. We have various different people on here with different, typically local type of. I think the only one that was not local was the first organization that doing the robotics type of training. But otherwise, it's very much of them are very local, but also expanding. But it's really interesting to see the different perspective of how do you get that connection between the education centers and the businesses going, and how do you engage the young people and make manufacturing interesting, or as one of our colleagues on Industry 4.0 called, we coined together, how do you make manufacturing sexy again, right? So the
Yeah.
idea is really to get people interested in seeing that it is an interesting area. It's something that until you actually had some experience and exposure to it, you really don't have any idea what it really is and what the opportunities are. So it's about highlighting those for those kids, right?
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, one of the stories I like telling is, my first day on the job as, that informal apprentice machinist was the first day I'd seen a CNC machine. I'd literally had no idea at all. And
Right.
here I am sort of like being confronted with, some initial realities of what manufacturing really is, but coming into it with that like consumer mindset, not having any clue how stuff is really made, and what it costs, how much effort goes into it on the front end. And yeah, and then it was, it felt like sky was the limit after that, but I couldn't have even fathomed what the possibilities were before ever really being introduced. And so yeah, we certainly can't expect anybody else to.
Right, yeah. Yeah, what I'd like to talk a little bit about. So normally, there are programs in even high school, but also colleges around trying to educate kids in the area of manufacturing. But with your, especially the topic you put up here, is a little bit different perspective of doing it. The idea of business, or a student-run business. I'd like to get a little more in your perspective on that, and where you see that as an advantage, and how does it differ from other ways to kind of engage people at colleges and high schools around this.
Yeah, so the common model right now is pretty much the one that's being used by all the community colleges and tech centers around, which is the standard sort of, 2-year like associates or certificate centered around manufacturing, primarily, machining with some add-ons for, with some engineering classes and maybe some 3D printing that they might include. But they're kind of standalone programs. And so they're not directly connected to industry. They'll have whoever they're able to have in there as an instructor, but they're all kind of facing the same problems, which are, recruitment of students and instructors, and with primary barriers for recruiting instructors kind of being the amount of money that they're able to pay instructors coming in. And that's often tied to, the recruitment challenges that they're having. And, the question is like, how do they make that any better? But then they're also funded, primarily through grants, and then whatever they can bring in that's attached to the head count that's within that program. But if they're having recruiting challenges bringing students in, then what do they do? And one of the primary issues there is actually accessibility for folks. The thing to keep in mind for tech centers and community colleges is that they're kind of the first entry point for folks that kind of exist in the lower quintile or two of socioeconomic status. And so when you're thinking about folks that are in the lower quintile or two of socioeconomic status, like economic accessibility becomes a primary concern. How do you succeed in taking care of your own life as you're going to college? That could be a huge barrier for folks on like figuring out how to pay the bills while they're committing so much time, especially if they've got all sorts of other sort of, extenuating factors that are sort of playing into things, drawing their attention away or time away to, deal with other things. And that could be, ailing family members, or even like chaotic home life, et cetera, that sort of like all contribute, as well as, disconnection. So oftentimes these programs are sort of operating in silos, and their only real connection to industry is their advisory boards, which are typically assembled through local manufacturers that, maybe there's somebody that feels inspired to be a part of helping out these programs, and so they'll join the advisory board, but they're typically only meeting quarterly for an hour or two, and giving their advice on what they think the program should be doing, and then that's about it, right? And thinking about how do you create sort of like an incentive model to engage those industry companies with these programs in ways that don't just require somebody kind of like going out of their way to volunteer their time. And student-run businesses can help kind of address all of these challenges, including that one. But they can also create opportunity to bring in more funds to the program. They create more accessible opportunities, and we'll be talking quite a bit about that today. Pardon me, let me wet my mouth real quick. We're doing it live.
No problem. It's one of the things that I always think about when I'm thinking about these kind of connections between education centers and businesses. It's often very, very specific around whatever the business has something problem they got to solve. But a lot of times it's more like, as you said, advisory to the school of what they're supposed to do. But the student-run businesses, to me, the real thing that kind of makes me interested about it is, instead of having a traditional curriculum, and here are the same thing that every class has to make for this particular session or something. Now you're actually, first of all, making something new constantly, and also you're making something that is supposed to, if you're successful, be actually used, right?
Yeah.
That to me should get all these young people interested in that kind of stuff as well, while they're students, because they're actually producing something that might actually make value to the company they're working with right away.
Absolutely. And in the case of student-run businesses, that's exactly what they would be doing. They would be making parts that would be then being sold to any partner companies that are working with that program, and thus help fund the program while giving the students real-world opportunities to learn things.
Exactly.
And it's a huge boon for any of the programs that are operating this way. But unfortunately, it's not yet really been a model that's been adopted by community colleges and tech centers. I know of one off the top of my head, which is Rankin, that's operating a student-run business, and that seems to be going quite well for them. But otherwise, there's only a handful of other programs that are operating student-run businesses for manufacturing, and they're operating out of high schools. So there's probably a few folks that'll watch this, and maybe some that are watching it right now, that know of Cardinal Manufacturing, and they've been operating for a bit more than a decade now and growing tremendously. And within the high school program, I think the video that I watched recently said they're serving something like 230 students a day in that program. Now, tech centers and community colleges aren't going to be able to do that because they don't operate the same way that high schools do. But they just kind of serve as a great example of what's possible if you choose to use student-run businesses as your model. And it's really not something that community colleges and tech centers should be so like foreign to the idea of, right? I mean, thinking about like culinary programs or programs that are doing like, dental assisting, or even, programs that are teaching folks to become, like cosmetologists and hairdressers. They often are always operating these student-run businesses within them, but they haven't yet taken on sort of the opportunity that manufacturing as a student-run business presents. So those of us,
it's more like those businesses are more for the college itself, right? You can get a cheap haircut, or you can go and get your teeth cleaned or something like that. It's not really as much, at least external, where student-run businesses would be predominantly external, right? To try to work with the community as opposed to just work within the school.
Yeah, exactly right. And so thinking about student-run business for manufacturing, those of us that have been in manufacturing for some time know a thing or two about process controls, right? And with, say operating CNC machines, you can implement really stringent process controls for everybody to follow that make sure the quality of your parts that are coming out, regardless of who's at the machine operating it, that they'll they'll come out correctly, right? I mean, there's, obviously how you load or what have you can have an effect, but those things are pretty easy to start teaching students like right away.
Yeah.
And then you can charge essentially what would be standard shop rate for running those parts. And that's something that typically student run businesses are not able to do. So, if you go and get your haircut, or, you have the college program cater an event or something like that, you're paying a pretty like steeply discounted rate because you're creating that learning opportunity, and the quality that you might have on the back end wouldn't be what you would expect from
yeah, I mean, it's you're putting your hands in somebody that's learning at the same time, right? Whereas, as you say, if you have a student-run business, you have students that are just starting in, but you have students that've been there for 2 years or whatever. You have a mixture, and then you have some teachers as well that's been doing it for a while, and so you can definitely put processes in place to make sure that the outcome of the products are at a quality that would be expected as a business, right?
Exactly right.
How do these businesses handle? Because I'm assuming that a lot of universities are organized as nonprofit or in some level like that. But then you get a student-run business. Do they have to then go out and get an EIN number and organize and identify, pay taxes and all that kind of stuff? How do they handle that part of it?
So they could go that route of registering as a traditional business and paying taxes and doing all of that, but they could also register as a nonprofit as long as all the net proceeds that are coming out of that program are feeding back into the program, right? And if it's operating under the college itself, I mean, there ought to be routes to even go back to the general fund if they wanted to. Though I would encourage everybody to just feed all of that into growing their program and supporting it further.
Absolutely.
And going into one of the big rubs that a lot of programs have, as I mentioned earlier, is recruiting staff that know what they're doing, right? So often folks that are in kind of the prime of their careers, where you or I might be, it's going to be really hard to pull us away from that, right? We need to make money, thinking down the road for retirement, to make sure that we're able to support ourselves. And so taking a pay cut that might amount to half of what we're used to making to go off and teach students is just too big of a barrier. We can't really take that on. And so then these programs are sort of stuck with the only folks that have incentive are either very early in their career or getting ready to retire. But those folks that are getting ready to retire aren't exactly representative of those that are coming up in industry right now. And then that sort of creates a little bit more challenges with recruitment or being up to date on current industry trends, or how culture is progressing, et cetera, et cetera. And all these things sort of end up tying into one another. And student run business, so we're talking about the net proceeds that might come out of it. So say you're operating your student run business, and depending on the work that's coming through, you could be charging anywhere from say like $70 to $150 per machine hour, depending on the complexity, right? And you might be able to get on the higher end if you've got a really skilled instructor there that's able to set up all those processes. But say you're doing that, and you're able to pay your students that are working within the jobs throughout the student run business somewhere between like 15 and 18 bucks an hour. Well, you have, after machine maintenance and all of that, pretty decent margin that can then feed into the fund that supports that program, that can, one, provide scholarships potentially for folks that need that additional access, or give you the additional funds that you need to be able to pay an instructor that has the skills that you want. You then have the funds necessary to start baiting somebody in. Now, you might have to front load a little bit of investment to get a program like this kicked off and pull somebody in, understanding that, based on, all right, if we can get a student run business going that has, so many folks in it and so many machines running, we'll be able to afford this plus whatever else, so we'll invest in the program to get it launched that way. But the great thing is most of these tech centers actually have all the equipment necessary now to get going, right? Thinking about Haas has been working with technical centers and community colleges for many, many years, donating machines and providing access. I think about one of the local programs that I advise on at Lake Washington Institute of Technology. If you go into their shop, they've got about like 6 or so like Haas mills, and then they've got like a few lathes, and that's a lot of production capability just like from the get-go, right? And so all they would have to do is, put together a plan and then turn the key and start making some parts, rather than just having those machines kind of sitting idle all day, except for the little bit of time here and there that somebody might go use it for lab time. And it creates
what's driving these initiatives? Is this someone like you going to a college and they or a university, they see the idea, or is it also business involved that says, hey, we could use something like this, but at the same time we're now greasing a pipeline for young people coming back into our business, so we would definitely support it. Maybe they're, instead of paying per part, they'll do a grant into that or something. But how's it typically started? Is it a business talking to the colleges, or this college is saying, hey, this is a different way to train our people, and at the same time we're actually getting more resources to do so?
It's kind of either or. It can be. Really, I think it just takes somebody kind of inspired to go in and say, hey, we can do this. Here's a path forward for us. Let's go for it. Thinking about silos earlier, how these programs sort of often operate as sort of standalone, just with some advisory boards. Well, most folks in the advisory boards are just folks that are out working at various, shops and businesses, right? And they can range from, somebody that's working on the shop floor to company execs, but they're very just in industry. They're not in education other than just this advisory role that they're working in. And so they're often not really coming in with ideas about how to create more accessible opportunities. They're just coming in to say like, hey, these are the things that industry needs. We need somebody that has, XYZ skill set, and here's how we think that you can, deliver on that or something, right? And then folks on the educational side often have only ever been on the educational side outside of the instructor themselves. But the instructor themselves they're typically buried in all kinds of work, because these programs often don't have a whole lot of funds to, delegate a lot of support staff into supporting these programs. And so you've got an instructor that's wearing every single hat possible, right? Developing all the curriculum, delivering all of the curriculum, working, with the students. Oftentimes recruiting even gets thrown onto the instructor's shoulders, where, they want the instructor to then not only do all these other things that equal more than a regular job already, but then also go out and try to recruit students. And so, them having that sort of brain space to create innovation and try to take on something else it can be a bit much. And so it requires kind of folks on all ends, not just the instructor, but folks from the administrative staff at the colleges, but then even on the, the business side through the advisory board, to be like, hey, we can adopt this new model. Here's how we can support you in doing that. And then kicking it off.
So do you see, like, with a student-run business, as a business, you need more than just the plant floor workers and machinists. You need a business. You need the typical resources a business has, which would be finance and marketing and management, etc.
And
that also something
yeah.
where those schools actually say, hey, we got training of people producing products, but at the same time we're running a business, so we got other opportunities for learning as well.
Exactly right. And that can incorporate a lot more. So you can actually extend branches out to, say, other programs that you have within your college to start pulling people in. So, say you have a marketing program, which you probably do, you start pulling people in to, do marketing projects centered around the shop, and so on and so forth. So like going back to Cardinal Manufacturing again, operating out of high school, in the beginning, they have students select the different jobs that they might want to do. And then, as there's positions available within them, they get put into them, and then they learn the skills associated with that. And so say you're operating a manufacturing centered student run business, part of your program could be giving somebody an opportunity to step into like each of those roles in some form or fashion. And then they get a really well-rounded understanding of what's going on. And another thing that I like to talk about, so I mentioned that, what these colleges are sort of like the first entry point for folks for like post-secondary education that exist on the lower couple quintiles of socioeconomic status, right? And a common topic that comes up in programs that are providing services to folks are things like employability skills, right? Or soft skills or what have you. And this stuff comes up because, we have these disconnected networks and folks that are living sort of like disconnected from networks that are working in industry, and thus not being like given opportunity to see, all of the things that folks are doing, and then learning how to emulate those and all that. Then we have to start focusing on employability skills so that folks, when they go out into industry, they're able to get that job because they have now all of the hard skills necessary, but then also all of the sort of like, people and soft skill type stuff that's going on. Well, if you're operating a student-run business, what better opportunity than to give somebody to just learn those things and practice them every day over the course of that program. And so then the person that's coming out not only has this sort of well-rounded look at how these businesses operate, so they're not just, say, going into an entry-level position at a shop and having no idea like what all these other jobs are actually doing, especially as they're sort of like being confronted with, the realities of what manufacturing really is, and letting all that stuff soak into their brain too. Well, now they get all that, but then they've also had all of this time to develop those soft skills necessary for them to be able to get that job and keep that job, right?
Yeah, a lot of the soft skills you learn by doing, right? And so if you haven't been out there doing it, you don't have that kind of skills developed yet. And so that makes a ton of sense. I was just thinking about it right now, just wondering what the resume of a graduating student would look like if they've been part of this, right? It's completely different than what you normally would see, right? Because they've really been doing stuff, and they've been part of doing valuable work for manufacturers and other companies in the area. It's just very, very interesting.
Yeah, and they could step in and immediately be making more money, because now they've got a year or two of experience under their belt. And I haven't seen this in operation yet, but this is an idea that I really, really, really want some tech center out there to adopt, which is incorporating apprenticeship with their programs. So I see it in reverse. So registered apprenticeships that are out there will partner with educational institutions to attach college credit to the
Right.
apprenticeship classes that they're teaching. But what if you flipped it around, where this program that's operating a student-run business partners with a registered apprenticeship, either within their state or one of the federal registered apprenticeships, which there's a couple right now. So we got NTMA and FAME, FAME, which is put together by Toyota. Say you partner with them, and now your student-run business is also registered as a training agent for that registered apprenticeship, so that when somebody starts their first job at the student-run business, they're now also an apprentice. And when they finish the program, they're already a year or two into their apprenticeship, right? So they can come out with a college certificate. They can come out with a couple of years of apprenticeship under their belt. They come out with work skills. They've been able to have a job that's supporting them the entire way. And these programs are getting more money into their pockets, which means that they can support their programs more, make sure that these instructors are well paid, kept up to date on their skills, and importantly supported throughout the process. And so this is why I really want to keep pitching this idea of student-run businesses to all of the tech centers that I possibly can, so that they can start doing this, because it solves problems for everybody throughout the entire pipeline. And then it creates real engagement with industry, because now these students are making parts for industry. The business that's getting those parts is now invested in being part of that program, kind of intrinsically, right? It no longer requires them to come in and volunteer out of the goodness of their heart. Like, they are tied into it now, right? And then the business will feed resources and knowledge and expertise and create opportunities for these students. And probably, even be a route for students to start getting jobs relatively easily. But they'll also be invested in that student staying in. So this is another challenge that a lot of programs have, right? So say I'm a student that goes in and I know that like money is a bit of an issue for me, but I'm committed. I want to get a job in manufacturing. And this is the only way that I know how to do it outside of, winning the lottery, so to speak, by say applying to Boeing and getting my resume selected somehow. And then so maybe making it in, which is, what a lot of folks from my high school were trying to do. But, it did seem like sort of winning the lottery of sorts, right? And being able to get in. Well, students will go into these programs and then they'll get, say like 6 months in. And so they'll have sort of like basic skills. Now they know how to say like set a machine up, like a 3-axis machine. They can set it up, they can load tools. Well, now they've got real value to a company and they get an offer. And then they leave the program because now they're going to work at XY business, right?
Yeah.
But they're doing it very entry level. They're not, they're making whatever the base like bottom wage is for somebody to come in, but they need it because they need that money. And this has delivered on what they hoped would happen, which is getting them a job within the manufacturing industry. And so they'll leave the program, but then that leaves the institution itself now with lower headcount, one less completer. And when they're thinking about, the success of their programs, one of their key indicators, their KPIs is, completions, right? And if completions are too low, well, now this program is probably not going to get the funding that it would if completions were higher. And so this creates an incentive model for students to want to stay in because now they don't need to go leave to get that job in industry because they've already got one. And this one is teaching them things at a much more accelerated pace than the business is going to be able to if they bring them in, but also the businesses that are tied into this program, getting the parts and feeding in resources, knowledge, expertise, all of that stuff. They want those students to complete now too. And because their sort of employment needs are sort of being taken care of because say, all right, I need to hire so many people in my company. Well, why do I need to do that? I need to be able to keep production levels at a certain point, right? Well, if I'm offloading that sort of production need to this college program, I don't have to be in such a rush to hire folks anymore. And so it works. Right?
Yeah. And then you hire somebody out of that program that finished at a little bit higher level and to another area of your manufacturer that you probably would want to have more control over. And it makes a ton of sense, right? You leave them in the program, offsetting the work that you now can have that program doing for you anyway. And then once they're ready, they can come in and at a higher level and start right away. It's a win-win for both the colleges, the businesses, and the students, right? So how do you get into that idea? Is this something that's, so I know you work locally in the Washington State area. But is this a Washington State thing, or is this the first time I've heard the term student-run business, right? But I can imagine it's outside as well. So where does it originally come from? Who started it, and how do you get involved in it?
I'm not sure who started it originally. For me, this has been sort of a passion that's developed out of just my own experiences and kind of seeing what's been being done out there, but then also seeing some opportunity to innovate within the space. So when I was at AJAC, AJAC stands for the Aerospace Joint Apprenticeship Committee. They operate a registered apprenticeship here in Washington State. They were also operating Manufacturing Academy, which I mentioned earlier. Manufacturing Academy was a pre-apprenticeship program focused at the time on dislocated workers and out-of-school youth. They now have some high school programs operating as well as a program that's operating with a local juvenile detention center, and they've been wildly successful. But while I was at AJAC, I got introduced to a couple social enterprises that were operating here in the state: Skills Inc., Orion Industries, and Pioneer Human Services. Skills Inc. and Orion Industries are focused on creating pathways for folks with disabilities. Pioneer Human Services is focused on creating pathways for formerly incarcerated talent. And, these are operating as private businesses, right? Typically, they'll have one portion of the company registered as a nonprofit and the other portion registered as a for-profit that sort of like feed each other. And then that way they're able to say, like, the nonprofit side is able to receive grant funds that can help fund support services and caseworkers for folks that are coming through. But these businesses, rather, that operate some of these programs have grown tremendously. They just don't have a whole lot of network outside of their bubble, and so they haven't really sort of like made it into the sort of like mind of the mainstream manufacturer, right? But they're doing incredible work and incorporating workforce development into their processes, right? And using the funds derived from those processes to create this sort of like cyclical, this feedback loop back into the program to then support their workforce development programs, allow it to grow, and then also at the same time allow their capabilities and capacity and all that stuff to grow for their manufacturing operations. Worked beautifully. But I didn't see anybody doing this on the workforce development side in the sort of traditional sector. All right. And then, eventually I got introduced to what Cardinal Manufacturing was doing. But again, they were doing it out of the high school. And it was sort of like, okay, we've got these two things that are sort of like working pretty well. And we've got all these needs that exist, for business itself. And we've got this giant skills gap and, all these manufacturers that are desperate to bring folks in, but feeling challenged on, how to do that. Nobody's applying. And there's these programs that are just sort of like holding themselves together, by a thread, right? Because they're not being funded well enough, because they don't have the recruitment, they don't have the completions, because industry is pulling people away too fast. And so, what do we do? How do we solve these problems together? And what was like, this social enterprise model is a great one. And so when I left my job over at Microsoft to start working on Equity Machine Works, I was kind of looking at creating this model within just sort of like private industry itself, sort of adopting some of what I'd seen at Skills Inc. and Orion Industries, but applying it in some different ways, tying in with apprenticeship, and kind of focusing on creating pathways that help increase the diversity within our organization or within our industry. But there's tremendous opportunity right now just within these community colleges and technical centers that, again, have all the equipment. They've got staff that can help support, making this happen, and kind of adopt a new model that will address all of their problems. It'll address concerns for the students and business from an intrinsic level, right? And just like create, really deliver on their needs and their values in ways that keep folks engaged. And so, I've been doing everything that I can to encourage these programs to take this on, because, it's going to be wildly successful. It is for the programs that are operating this way already, right? We just need to sort of jump on and start doing it. And so
any like national, not necessarily organization, but starting to have some kind of conversation with people like you around this topic and trying to spread the idea, because again, I mean, as one person, you are definitely limited, right? And so with 50 states around here, is there something wrong with this becoming something that other institutions are talking about and trying to figure out and look at case stories, how they were done in other places?
Absolutely. I mean, I have some exciting news to share. I suppose I haven't been promoting it very much on LinkedIn, but NCATC, which stands for the National Coalition of Advanced Technology Centers, they are a coalition of a few hundred advanced technology centers and community colleges out there. They're looking to figure out new ways of doing things. And, I get the chance to be the opening keynote on September 20th out there in North Carolina, just a couple hours away from where you're at, and
yep.
Talk about this exact idea and how it can help serve all of their needs and give them a chance to sort of see the light to say on, how to adopt a new model. And everybody that I've talked to within NCATC, is quite excited about this, which is why they've invited me to come speak. And they're partnered with quite a few like bigger names in industry already. So Tony
and I'm
Neary,
assuming as well as some universities. You got right there in Raleigh. You got NC State. You got Duke. You got Chapel Hill. Chapel. You got a lot of different colleges, and universities right close to that could definitely have programs like this. No problem, at least. Yeah.
Yeah. And as I was going to say, NCATC is already partnered with industry as well. So Tony Neary, she's the director of education for Haas. She's a big part of this. She's been one of the primary people that I've been talking with, in preparation for this coming conference. With her and Craig. Craig's the CEO of NCATC, and they're very close friends and working hand in hand on trying to, progress education in industry and culture in industry. And they really want to see some new things start happening. They've got, I think Siemens is involved, and I can't remember off the top of my head. There's a couple other companies that are going to be there, but some bigger names that are engaging with this as well. So it's not just a topic of conversation on the educational side, but these larger businesses are trying to do what they can to engage and create this sort of separation, and instead of like having these silos, kind of building a bridge and working together on solving these problems that really affect us all. And these tech centers and community colleges are essentially what make up and are going to make up sort of like primary pipeline for folks that are coming into our industry. And so it's of major concern to all of us. And yeah, they're taking it quite seriously and looking to innovate in the space. And I'm pretty excited about it. I honestly can't wait to get in front of the group there at the conference and then plant the seed of this idea in their minds and see where that goes. I mean, I really, really hope in a couple of years we'll be seeing quite a few programs that are operating this way and seeing the successes that it will bring them.
No, that's exciting. That's really, really exciting. Before we go there, just another question I had too. I was thinking about it. So you're talking about the group that are getting not colleges but high schools involved in this, student-run businesses.
Mm-hmm.
The young people that graduate from there, where do they go? What is the difference? I can see when you go into university, they go straight into manufacturing, into business right after that, right? Mm-hmm. But what is the kind of path for the high school students that are part of programs like this?
So the high school programs, the pathways out of them can be relatively varied, which is great, right? So the students that are coming through these programs, they get introduced to the manufacturing space and start getting a lot of ideas, right? And depending on where their interests lie, could really decide what they choose to do next. I mean, maybe they want to be a machinist, and so they go straight out and get involved in an apprenticeship or go start working for an organization sort of straight away and building those skills. Maybe they've had their eyes set on becoming a mechanical engineer, and now this is their introduction to things on the shop floor and getting kind of those ideas and skills kind of like soaked in and really kind of inspiring them to continue pushing, right? And I think it's amazing because most folks out there, when they decide what their major is going to be when they're going to university, they're just kind of like, I think I would like this a lot, so now I'm going to commit my entire life to doing this thing. But they don't really have any idea what it really is, right? They're just sort of like this idea that's in their head. And so, these programs give them a real introduction to what the things are. And so, the students coming out of them are, obviously much more likely to be successful. But, say you're a marketing student, you want to go through there, you take on the shop as your marketing project and you get some real experience and then go off to university and continue studying and become much more well-rounded. And these programs, for those that, continue on in engineering, and, there's always this big fight between those that are on the shop floor and those that are, off doing the engineering. And it's like, everybody's grumpy at each other because nobody knows what the other one's like, what the other one knows or, whatever. Right. And there's some truth to what's going on there. I mean, I can't count the number of times that I'd been frustrated engineers in the past that, just they'd only ever lived at their desk, and they didn't really understand the sort of like challenges around manufacturability and things like that, and so that's often things that we would end up having to talk about. Well, if a student comes out of a program where they're engaged with that already, and then they go into engineering, well, by the time they finish, they're going to be a much more well-rounded engineer.
Absolutely, yeah, no, for sure. So we got about 15 minutes left. We'll see how far we go. But one of the things that I think would be interesting to know too, as a part of joining the NTAC in Raleigh here in a month or so, what else can people that are listening to this event here, how can they help, and how can they help even promote the idea and get engaged with this?
Yeah, so I definitely didn't want to just come talk, and to folks that are like, all right, yeah, this sounds great, but there's nothing I can do about it. There is something that you can do about it, actually. So these programs need folks on their advisory boards. Often these advisory boards are just comprised of, some folks that, again, have gone out of their way, but it's a pretty small pool of folks that are connected enough to these programs that feel inspired to go engage with them. And that means their access to talent and ideas is quite limited. And so if you're hearing this and you're like, oh, wow, like this would be really, really cool to have in my community, but my college or tech center is not doing it, join an advisory board for that community college or tech center. Plant this idea in their head, help drive it forward. If, say, you're in a position that allows you to, ship off work to various, subcontractors or what have you, right? You've got an opportunity to help get a program like this off the ground and then feed it the work that it needs to be able to survive, right? And so that's another thing that you can do. Also, if you'd like to see registered apprenticeship get involved, maybe you've been thinking about it yourself, engage with one of the federal registered apprenticeships, make that a part of your shop, advise the program to start incorporating it. There's things that you can do from that level. And, you could go further. If you're feeling really inspired and you're like, oh, I want to go teach students, you could do that too. But I think the lowest barrier of things is just joining an advisory board and helping push things along and, creating opportunity that way.
So let's say somebody joined the advisory board of the local college. What would some of the resources be in order to help kind of plant the seed, provide some context around it, look at examples and results of other places? Are there some resources out there that they can get access to? Or is it still kind of in the, what do you call it, like infancy stage and people just talking about it?
They could certainly reach out to Rankin and sort of see, talk to them about what they've been doing there. Cardinal Manufacturing, again, would be a great place to talk to. There was an organization that doesn't seem to have been able to take off or support itself that was trying to, help, I guess, copy Cardinal's model and introduce it to other high schools. But I was looking into that, and that doesn't seem to be too much going on. So I would say, like, look at these two case studies, Rankin and Cardinal, use them as the examples, and see what you can pull off there. But otherwise, this model within this sort of realm is relatively sort of like in its infancy. So there's not really, like, you can't go to, say, like Deloitte and look at a study on how student run businesses is affecting completions. But if you do go look at the success of these programs, or take a step into looking at social enterprises that are running privately within industry, I think those are probably even a better model to kind of look at, in the sense that, like, a college has grant funds that they can rely on. They've got this sort of like extra margin of support that they can work with, right? That, say, if you're a privately run business, you don't have that. So you have to be able to run like especially efficient in running your manufacturing operations, and then how you design and deliver these workforce development programs to make sure that you're able to survive. And the fact that, like programs like Skills Inc., Orion Industries, Pioneer Human Services, Lighthouse for the Blind is another one that I forgot to mention earlier, where they're adapting manufacturing processes for blind folks and like nailing it, right? And they've grown tremendously over the last few decades. They're wildly successful. They're doing it within industry, not just like in the educational space with all of that extra support that might come with it. And so, I'd say those are like great examples that people can look at on the, sort of validity.
Yeah, I plan to reach out. I plan to reach out right after this, and we'll put some links in the notes in the comment section of this this afterwards, so people have some at least a way to kind of reach out and see what's going on and what other people saying, etc. So I think that'd be a good first step. But then I'll definitely be looking at you starting more when you get a little bit more in organized within your state, and then I'm assuming I could see something happen with the NTI. What's it in NTATC? Yeah, that they could start having some resources as well available once they see the value in it too. But a lot of times it's just about having some resources that says, hey, it's not just me, because I could see it's easy enough to explain what the concept is, but how do you start, right? What is all the different things you got to think about, and how do you make sure you think of everything there? That will be some good resources, I think, for somebody that is thinking about this. Would be great thing to start within your own community, your own college, community college, university, whatever it is. Yeah. So we'll put some links of some of the references you've given in the comments here after this. So so what do you expect or what do you see going to be happening over the next couple of years here? I mean, basically, what's your feedback when you talk to people? Does this really seem like we can expect, I don't know, a third or half or 10% of colleges starting doing this over the next couple of years? What are you kind of getting from this? And I'm sure you're going to get a lot from when you go to Raleigh as well, getting feedback there. Well, what's your feel for what's going to happen over the next 2 to 5 years on this?
So I guess I think about, there's this term sort of like golden ratio or what have you, right? Where it's like it takes a certain percentage of a population to adopt an idea before it really starts taking off, right? And so what I imagine is there'll be a few, right, that start taking it on, and then they'll be successful. And then folks will see that success, and then they'll start jumping on the bandwagon. And then you'll sort of see it really, really climb. But based on the sort of passion and excitement that I'm seeing when I'm engaging in these conversations with folks, without question, we're going to be seeing some popping up over the next few years. And they will be successful, and they will become sort of the model for others to adopt. And then I'd say we'll see a lot more in the 5 to 10 year range. I think it'd be very popularized at that point. And that's about the same thing that's been happening with these high school programs, which I found to be quite interesting. So when I first got into workforce development, there weren't very many high school programs in operation. Cardinal was in operation, but within sort of like this like West Coast region, there wasn't really a whole lot happening, right?
Right.
But then once it started and others kind of saw it, they started jumping on and doing it. But I was surprised by it because I felt like high school programs would have the most barriers in getting started, right? They're working with minors, and so there's all kinds of extra stuff that you have to be concerned about in that regard, with like how many hours anybody's able to work, the things that they can engage in, all of that. The fact that students are only coming in for like a period or two and having to cycle through, and so the program design is much more complicated than it would be for saying having an individual that can put full-time hours into something. But they've done it, and they've done it really well and are continuing to grow. Another one that came to mind was Eagle Manufacturing. That's another high school program that's operating, and they're a little bit newer. They're just I think a handful of years old, but they've also been continuing to grow and getting more engaged. And we're just going to see this stuff continue to take off. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about this NCATC conference opportunity, because for many of the programs there, it's probably going to be the first time that an idea like this has been introduced to them.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And it creates a lot of opportunity to, for them to start engaging with that idea, and then a chance for us to look back, or look at the state of things a couple of years from now and seeing what happens, how those programs do, and what ends up happening afterward, and sort of thinking about like Equity Machine Works. My hope with Equity Machine Works is that we can get going and become a model that private business can adopt, right? Become community connected, become connected to apprenticeship, develop their own workforce development program that integrates with their operations and create sort of like a win for everybody that's around and gets them more engaged with the community at the same time. And so we'll have more and more case studies developing over the next couple of years for, different programs to start engaging in this. And I think really start making some very serious headway into like closing that skills gap, and then kind of tying that into the sort of shifts in workforce culture that we're seeing, as well as sort of like standard societal culture. And the areas that, manufacturing kind of like catching up on things, these things will sort of like tie together to serve all those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my belief is that the current skills gap that we have is really just because of lack of exposure. It is. We've seen it even with other guests we've had on, or we have some younger millennial co-founders on our group as well, and their excitement about something that they never thought they would be working in is just amazing. And to me, it's just a matter of, if you have more exposure and you have hands-on exposure, as you're talking about here, right? That's just going to increase that interest and get more and more of the Gen Zs, Gen Zs right now, of course, out of high school and college, to be interested in this. And so that's a great way to kind of narrow that skills gaps a lot. So really interesting stuff you have been telling me about here. I have enjoyed this conversation very, very much. Just before we finish here, where can people reach you if they have questions or ideas they want to talk to you about?
Yeah, so you can certainly find me on LinkedIn, Justin Sherman. Unfortunately, there's a few of us out there, but remember this face.
Yeah.
Or you can email me at justin@equitymachine.works, and works WORKS. So just you expect, Justin at equitymachine.works.
Very good. Again, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you very, very much for joining us here today. Any last thoughts, comments before we close it out today?
I want to say thank you for inviting me and providing another platform to spread these ideas with. I'm really passionate about making some change and driving industry forward in ways that I really see a tremendous value in, and you've given me a chance to do that a little bit more. I appreciate it. And for those of you out there that are listening or watching this later, go join an advisory board. Do it.
Absolutely,
it's worth it. Yeah.
Join an advisory board in a local community college, university, tech center, whatever, and get engaged. Absolutely. So again, just want to thank everyone for joining us here live today, and then of course this is recorded, so you can watch it anytime afterwards as well. This was Industry 4.0 Club. It was our Thursday session on people, process, and culture, and we were here joined by Justin Sherman, talking about a very, very interesting topic of student-run businesses and how you engage young people early in understanding manufacturing and get interested in this space. Want to end as we usually do. If you like to have these type of conversations, please join us on our events, which are either on LinkedIn Live or Clubhouse so far. Monday to Thursday, around noontime, 12:30 Eastern, 11:30 Central. And you can find our schedule on www.industry40club.com or here on LinkedIn or on Clubhouse, of course. So again, thanks very much, Justin.
Thank you.
And we will close it out here today with that. And really appreciate everybody joining here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.